Hey guys, and welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to be joined by Steve Flink, and we're going to be reviewing the 2026 Australian Open, where of course Carlos Alcaraz and Elena Rybakina were the eventual champions. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Faizan. It's nice to be back with you. Yet another major is behind us, and we certainly got some great value out of it at the very end, which is when you want it to be. I just want to preface that by saying I'll never forget interviewing the tournament director, Patrice Clerc, I believe his name was, back in '92 at the French. And I went in to interview him the day of the finals. It was after Sellis and Graf had played the final, and an epic 10-8 in the third that Monica won to win the women's. And Courier was about to play Peter Korda, Seb Korda's father, in the final. And he said, look, nothing matters like the final. You can have great matches all the way through, but if you don't have a great final, people remember that. And if you do have a great final, they remember it even more. And that's really what we got this time around. I mean, yes, the Djokovic Sinner semifinal surpassed the final as a match, but it was still a very good final. And the women's final with Rybakina and Sabalenka was quite good as well, with a nice twist at the end, surprising twist, and a three-setter. So things ended on a very high note. And then you throw in, obviously, the Alcaraz-Zverev men's semis. You had two scintillating semifinals for different reasons, and then a very well-played final as well in the men. And then, again, two good women's semis, but a terrific women's final. So I like the way things concluded on that note.
Yeah, I agree. I think the men's semi-finals day was one of the best days of tennis I think I've watched in a very long time.
Yeah.
And it could be recency bias, but both matches were incredible five-set matches in the end, of course, as you mentioned. And I think that quality was very good for the most part. But of course, as is always the case, I feel like with epic matches, it's very hard for it to be an incredible quality over the whole five sets. But I think what makes the hallmark of a really great match and a classic is one that has the peaks and troughs and has the drama as well involved. And it's all wrapped into that neat little package, which ends up being an incredible watch and I think a spectacle in its own right. So I think that was definitely a treat. I'm sure the people that had tickets for that day would definitely remember it, and they would definitely have got their money's worth, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with your assessment. I would say this, though. I mean, there were some uneven parts, largely because of Carlos cramping and Zverev trying to figure out what was going to be required of him, where the tennis wasn't necessarily that great, although it came alive later. And there was some uneven tennis from Zverev in the second set when he served forward at 5-3 and let it get away. You could say that, but I would say about Djokovic Sinner that every set was pretty well played. We were all 6-3, 6-4 sets, all of them basically coming down to one break. It really was that, it was Novak going behind 3-11 the first and not being able to get that break back. And then, and it was Novak grabbing the early break in the second set. And no matter how much he was challenged with all those break points, he made it count. And then Novak got broken once at the end of the third. Novak broke once early in the fourth. Novak broke once in the fifth. So that's really the way I consider that to be the way it ought to be if both guys are playing well. That they save break points, they make the one service break count in each set, and that's basically what happened in the. So I would say that one. I think it was a higher caliber contest for a variety of reasons, but that's one of them. Nonetheless, the other was so suspenseful. And it had so many spectacular moments that we didn't have much to quarrel with there either.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to do something a bit different, Steve. And actually, we can start off with the men's, but I'd like to actually start off with that Sinner Djokovic match because I feel like there's a lot to unpack with that one. As going into it, a lot of people, including myself, thought that Sinner would get the win. And it seemed like he'd get the win in convincing fashion, given the fact that he'd won the last five matches they'd played. And Djokovic has struggled to take a set off him. He struggled to actually create breakpoint opportunities as well against Sinner. But it changed, of course, in this match. He came out with a very clear game plan and executed it to a T. And I think what was even more impressive was the fact that, and I think yourself and I were in that press conference, when he lost at Wimbledon, he sat in that press conference and said it would be very difficult for him to beat Yannick or Carlos in a best of 5 match.
Well,
And
he
he
said
felt
that
that
he
sorry,
said that at the U.S. Open as well. You're right. He said
yeah,
it at Wimbledon, then he basically repeated the same match at the Open. Let me just say, I see the path of the road you're going down. Let me just try to answer it this way. It's very true that if you go back to the 2024 Australian, Novak was lucky to get a set there. Yannick maybe got a bit tight in the third set, and Novak saved a match point and won a tiebreak to take it to 4. But the first two were really 1 and 2. He got destroyed the first two, and the fourth was not close either. So, and then you go to everything that happened late. Then they had a Shanghai final that Sinner was winning 6-3, but the two matches last year, I think Novak was a bit beat up. I think that was part of his point in the press conference you and I sat in, that by the time he got to these guys, he felt physically beleaguered, you might say. And so I don't think he was able to give the best account of himself. No doubt that Sinner played really well in those matches to beat him as straight at Roland Garros and Wimbledon last year, but I never felt Novak was really where he needed to be. He was close in Roland Garros. The 7-5 and 7-6 second and third sets were impressive, but not quite there. This time, because of the fact that he had a default from Menchik in the fourth round, and because he got a break against Musetti in the quarters and got off the court trailing 2-0 up a break in the third, but only spending about 2+ hours out there. So I did feel, and so I felt, everybody wondered, it was funny, he had not been playing well against Musetti before that retirement. It started to turn the tide in the third, but he really, I had felt that he had not benefited from all those extra days off from the Menchik default, in my view. You could argue that there were things that Musetti did tactically and technically that made life difficult for Novak, and I subscribe to that notion, but I thought he in turn was just plain off. And the win was another factor, yes, but I just felt like his rhythm was thrown by having that many days off. However, the fact that he got off the court so fast, he put that behind him. And I was convinced, one thing I was convinced of, I didn't think going in he was going to win. I would agree with you, but I was convinced he was going to play well and he was going to make this a much better match than what we'd seen from him recently against Yannick. And it ends up being one of those, I think, really special matches in his career that he will look back on, along with some of the triumphs in semis and finals at majors. He'll cite this one as one that he's extremely proud of, because when you fight off 16 out of 18 break points, and you do so not because the other guy is gifting them to you, but because you're taking them right out of his hands with service winners, with aces, with winners off the ground, with the right tactics, with daring second serves. He did it all on those break points. And they were scattered in every set, Faizan. Think about it. The first one that I thought was actually important was a love 3 break point in first set, because he got off to a slow start and won 3 points in 3 games, and now here he is about to be broken in the fourth game. Well, if he loses his serve there, that set could easily be 6-1. And I don't think he wanted to allow that to happen, and he served an ace to save the break point and served his way out of that, played him even the rest of the set, held serve the rest of the set, so that going into the second set, he was in a much better state of mind. It kind of reminded me a bit of when he beat Nadal in the 21 French semis, when Rafa was up 5-love and Novak battled back to 5-3. And so by the end of the set, he felt like, okay, I've got my bearings now. I'm playing better. It wasn't enough to win that set, but I'm ready now. And he ended up winning in 4. And this reminded me of that. And sure enough, he got that early break against Yannick in the second. And then that was the first instance at 3-1 in the second of a love 40 hold. He did it again later in the fifth. But that was such a big game, and that was indicative of that was symbolic of what was to come. It sort of showed us the resolve he had and the poise that he had and the belief. You could see it. Frankly, I don't like these kind of superficial comments most of the time from me or anyone else, but you could see it in his eyes. You could see it in his expressions. There was just something. I remember as I was watching it and as he was battling his way out of some of these difficult situations and looking at him and saying, he's feeling it today. He's feeling it. I just had that feeling. I would have been ready to. It gave me a feeling like he's not going to come off this court a loser. He's so committed and so confident, quietly confident. Wasn't doing a ton of fist pumping or anything like that, but it was just showing in that resolve and that resilience. So that was such a big hold in the second at love 40, and then he saved a couple of break points after that and got that set. That was impressive. And then the way that he bounced back after losing his serve at 4-5 in the third, because that was the only break of the third set, was a bit of scoreboard pressure on him, and he loses serve at 4-5. And Yannick played a good game, and Novak a bit tentative in that situation, gets the immediate break in the fourth. And then, of course, he's got trouble later on in the fourth at 4-3 with those break points. And he saves one with a really deep running cross-court forehand. And the second was a beauty where he served and volleyed on the second serve and caught Sinner off guard. And it was a good volley that set up an overhead winner. And he's out of that. And then even when he served for the set, it was 5-4, 40-15 back. It was a 40-15 back to deuce, and he held on from deuce. So it just seemed like there were so many of those tense moments on his serve where he just took his time and collected his thoughts and figured out exactly what he's going to need to do. And then the fifth was actually the most remarkable of all, if you think about it, because Sinner's losing either 1 or 2 points in the first 3 service games. He blitzed through those service games. And Novak has saves 5 break points in his first 2 service games, gets out of it again with great great execution under pressure, and then 3-all pounces for the break and gets it, and finds himself down love 40 again for the second time in the match. He holds from love 40, and that was such a great clutch hold, that love 40 hold that took him to 5-3. And then I had a funny feeling serving when he served for the match, a weird feeling. Those of us who followed this rivalry closely, Faizan, but he lost an 18 shot exchange on the first match point with no disgrace there, and then on the second match point he got that short return from Yannick and had time to run around and hit a forehand. It was a cross court backhand return from Sinner, so Novak was able to get around and hit a forehand, and it looked like it was going to be a sure winner. As when you saw where he was positioned, you were sure. But Yannick stayed home. He didn't move. He didn't run to the open court. And Novak's shot went right back to him. And there's the backhand pass down the line, making Novak hit a difficult half volley. Yannick passes him. And I'm thinking as Novak walks back to the baseline, boy, it just reminded me a bit of when Novak had triple match point against Sinner in that Davis Cup at the end of 23, which was that was Yannick's breakthrough, a big win, not a breakthrough win because he'd beaten him in the round robin of the year-end championships, but it was a huge win under the circumstances in the semis of Davis Cup. And he's love 40, triple match point down, and he got out of it. And I thought for a second, I wonder whether that might have even flashed into Novak's mind, because it was such a bizarre match point. It was just, that's a point that Djokovic is going to win 99 out of 100 times. But for some reason, he just chose the wrong direction. Plus, he didn't hit it hard enough. But I was so impressed that he went back and hit a very good first serve to the backhand that Sinner couldn't keep in the court. It went long, and then Novak sealed it on the third match point. So he wins 12 fewer points in the match. Sinner hit 72 winners to Novak's 46. Sinner's at 75% first serves, winning 80% of them, and Novak is at 70%, winning 9% less, 71%. You look at all these stats and the fact that he won 12 fewer points in the matches. How did he win it? Well, he won it. He's increasingly established himself over his 30s, really more so over his 30s, but even before that. But he's reinforced it, reaffirmed it so many times that he's just the greatest clutch player we've seen. Under pressure, he can produce, and this was such a shining example of it.
Yeah, agreed. Great summary, Steve. Not
Yeah.
much for me to add. All the points I had, I think you covered beautifully. But yeah, I think, as you mentioned, Novak is. It was one of those matches where, as you said, you look at the stats and you think, what's happened here? And he just played when it really mattered on the big points. He managed those points so well. And and then towards the end on those 2 match points, as you said, he thought maybe that could be a turning point, but he kept so calm.
He did.
And in those moments, and that was incredibly impressive. What I wanted to ask you actually, Steve, was you mentioned about the Menchik withdrawal maybe not helping him against Musetti.
Right.
But do you think that overall the withdrawal from Menchik and then obviously not having to play a full match against Musetti, the fact that he was maybe a little bit more fresh going into the Sinner match, I think that helped him over the 5 sets? Because I think what seemed to have been the case in previous tournaments is at this stage, he seems to have a hint of fatigue at this stage and maybe might struggle over 5 sets. But here, of course, that wasn't really the case. There were moments, of course, but he is 30 years of age where he looked like he might be physically strained a little bit, but he worked through it. And of course, he ended up winning the last 2 sets in really incredible fashion. So, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. No doubt that that was helpful. I think it was important, even though he lost those sets to Musetti, at least he played those sets. So it was ideal in a way because only out there a couple of hours, but you played. You didn't get another default. Suppose Musetti had gotten hurt in the second game of the match. I think that would have been. I just don't think that's what he needed. The sets were valuable, oddly, even though they were losing sets. So yeah, but I agree with you. It kept him fresher than he ever could have been, and it's probably the healthiest he's been coming into a major semi. Well, you'd have to go back at least to 23, maybe. I mean, because he wasn't feeling great all through the 24 Australian. He was battling something there. You heard it in his voice. And he was having some tough matches early on, and then a tough four-setter with Fritz coming into the semis. And so I feel like in that case, was he 100% when he played Sinner physically? Probably not then either. Well, I don't know, but certainly every case last year, every case. He got hurt against Alcaraz when he beat him in the quarters of Australia last year, and that meant that he ended up retiring with that leg injury against Zverev in the semi. Then he had a fairly smooth passage to the semis of the French last year. He was very efficient, but there were signs of something, maybe the movement not maybe being 100%. Even though as I alluded to earlier, he did play very well in the second and third sets, which were tight at 7-5 and 7-6. So, and then Wimbledon, no doubt about it. Wimbledon, I think, was the most glaring example, Faizan, of him being beat up. In fact, I honestly think the fall that he took at the end of the Kaboli match in the quarters was not insignificant. And I think what I saw from him in the first half of the first set of that semi with Sinner at Wimbledon last year, I thought immediately, there's no way he's going to win this match. He's out here to honor the occasion and to just be a pro and try to get it done. But it was clear to me that he knew in the back of his mind, in the condition he was in, there was really no chance. And then at the Open, a little less extreme than that, but still, there'd been niggling problems throughout the tournament, Faizan, the trainers coming out, the back, different little ailments that maybe added up. They were all, maybe some of them were small, but they added up to something large. Because by the time he played Carlos, it wasn't a bad first 2 sets, 6-4 first set and a tiebreaker in the second after having the 3-love early break. But he had nothing left in the third either. And he said it afterwards too. And that's when he made that comment for the second time about he didn't know it was going to how difficult it would be to beat those guys in best of 5, which is what made it quite interesting and amusing and fascinating when Courier brought that up to Novak after the Sinner win, brought up his U.S. Open comment and how he said, I said it would be difficult. I didn't say it would be impossible to beat one of those guys, which is true. So it shows you that he never gave up. Now, I will say this, we can get to the final. I know we're going to talk about the final, but he came out of this. We can talk about the details and the flow of the match against Alcaraz, but the fact that he lost a 4-set final that was so competitive, where he played a brilliant first set and a very good fourth, I think he doesn't come away satisfied, and you could hear it. He was basically, just what he was saying in that press conference, I should be content because I beat Yannick and I played 4 close sets with Carlos. But I don't think he was content. And I think that's the best news for his supporters out there, is that he thinks to himself, that was an opportunity and I'm going to give myself another, and I'm not giving up on this quest. And I'm going to keep going after the rest of these majors this year, and I'm going to get this done. He just seemed so much more positive in terms of what he was now expecting of himself than he did after Wimbledon or the Open last year, where he sounded almost resigned to not being able to do it. I mean, not giving up, but clearly having severe doubts.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Steve. Definitely more upbeat. And why wouldn't he be after that performance as well. And I think he knew that back to back it would be difficult against Sinner and Alcaraz, but he definitely put his best foot forward and he was fit and healthy, and that's a good start. And then to get a win over one of them now at Grand Slam, especially over 5 sets, I think is a huge positive for
Now,
him
I
for the
will
rest of the
say,
year.
I just want to add this though to that what you're saying, Faizan. Yeah, all that true. In turn, I think he was very disappointed and a bit perplexed about whatever this issue was that he wouldn't talk about regarding the loss of energy and why he kind of faded there in the second. Then it carried over into the third against Alcaraz because the first set was so brilliantly played by him. It's one to me. It's one of the best sets I've ever seen from him. And he said of the last few years, I would say I would have wanted to press him and say, wouldn't you say it might have been one of the best sets of your career? Because to do that against Carlos and break him twice and hold your own serve every time and win 16 out of 18 points on serve, and to make 4 unforced errors with the aggression that he was showing off the ground, particularly off the forehand. And he was good, calculated aggression, controlled aggression because he didn't foolishly go for lines if he didn't have to, but he was hitting the ball a ton, especially off his forehand, and he was ending the points quickly. So my point of saying all that, Faizan, is that he said he felt great about himself after that first set. And I think he did. And I honestly think at that stage, having started that well, he fully believed he was going to win that match. And then whatever happened, happened. And look, I don't want to be unfair to Carlos. Carlos really was, he's got such maturity and poise and he's able to clear his head and figure it out. And so it was such intelligence the way he approached the second set.
Yeah.
Now trying to give a lot, hitting his shots at much higher trajectories so as not to take unnecessary risks. Because I felt like in the first set it was primarily a slugfest, and Novak was just so much better,
Yeah.
so much sharper. And Carlos wanted to answer pace with pace, and it was not working.
No,
So
agreed.
so in the second set, he said, "No, that's not what I'm going to do. I got to try to get to his legs. I've got to make him stretch him out wide to his forehand, and I've got to prolong the rallies." Well, he succeeded on all those counts. And
Yeah.
so I don't want to say that it was just one, it was just Novak's drop in level. It was also a resolve and a purpose from Alcaraz that helped him get back in. What I am saying is that if Djokovic had stayed anywhere near the level he'd been at in the first set, we would have had a just a phenomenal second set, I suspect. In other
Yeah.
words, I think the second set would have been reminiscent of the second set of the Wimbledon final in 23 when Djokovic had won a 6-1 first set on the center court. And once again, Alcaraz dug in, found his range, changed his tactics, and they had an exchange of breaks. And then they went to a breaker, and Novak had a set point and hit that backhand in the net tape. And eventually, so he lost that set after having a set point. But my point is, I think it would have been something more like that, where the set was close, where Alcaraz got his teeth into it, but where he had to work much harder. Instead, it was a pretty routine 6-2 for him, but not a spectacular 6-2 like Novak's, just a very smart percentage tennis display from Alcaraz, and also much better serving too. So look, it was definitely a combination of the two. Alcaraz lifting his game and shifting his priorities, and Novak dropping off. And I thought that Djokovic early in the third, there were signs that maybe he was reviving a bit, but he got broken, and then we had that long game at 3-5 in the third, where he was up 40 and he saved the 4 set points and finally got broken on the fifth. But he actually had a couple of game points then. He was fighting so hard for that game, Faizan, in the end of the third, because could have allowed him to start serving in the fourth, which I think could have made life easier, because you'd much rather start serving and start building the pressure on the other guy. And instead he's serving from behind, and he had that tumultuous game on his serve in the second game of the fourth, where it was 6 break points, 6 deuces. He got out of it, and that was a crucial game for Djokovic to win. And I thought from that point on, he played very well in the fourth, and so did Carlos. Carlos wasn't really dipping in his level either, and he was continuing to use that width of the court off his forehand. And I think Novak was having a little bit more trouble than usual on the running forehand when he was pulled off the court. And Carlos exploited that. And yet, there's Novak 3-4, love 40 in the fourth, a nice hold, some clutch play there. And then he got himself that break point at 4-all. And that, of course, is where he said later, I had a good look at that forehand. He wasn't going for a winner. He was just trying to hit a deep cross-court forehand and wait for his next opening. And he drove it long. And that was a critical error because Carlos then obviously hit that crazy forehand winner. How he found that angle, I'll never know, because deuce, because it was he was standing behind the baseline near the center of the court. And he hit that forehand crosscourt that landed inside the service line, about an inch inside the sideline. It was and frankly, I don't want to call it lucky, because I don't think it is lucky. I think he's just so gifted sometimes that he is able to use that imagination to the hilt and come up with shots that nobody else could, and that was one of them. Then he holds on, and finally he breaks Novak at 5-6. Djokovic did a good job at 4-5, serving to stay in the tournament and stay in the match, to hold on. But then at 5-6, that 24-stroke rally kind of that's where Djokovic suddenly felt the physical strain again, and losing that point led to 3 more forehand errors the rest of the game. So, but still, I'm just saying, I think that it would have been fascinating if it had gone 5, because Djokovic was starting to get the crowd revved up. When he got to that break point at 4-all, he was really trying to get the crowd involved in a way that he hadn't done much during the match. And I think they would have stayed with him in the 5th, and it would have been an exhilarating atmosphere. And not to say that I would have counted Alcaraz out by any means. I just think it would have been a coin flip 5th set, because Djokovic there would have been a sense of revitalization, and a realization that, okay, it's all on the line here, one set. I'm going to throw my heart and soul into this, but he didn't get that chance. Nonetheless, he still came away with some that contributed to his positive feelings, in the sense that, okay, suppose he had lost the last 3, if it had been 2, 3, and 3, instead of that last one going 7-5 and being so competitive, he can feel a lot better. So he knows he played a great first and a very good fourth. And in between, for whatever the reasons, he wasn't quite up to the task. So I just thought, as usual, it was a delight to watch those two play, because as great as the tennis is in Sinner versus Djokovic, or Sinner versus Alcaraz, I think if you take the 3 matchups, the most pleasurable for most spectators would be Djokovic and Alcaraz, for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's to do with the start matchup, but I think that final really highlighted as well the reason why there is a difference between Sinner and Alcaraz in terms of their specific game styles. That's not to say one is necessarily better than the other, but it shows that, I think, like in many other sports, it's not just black and white. This person is better than this person. A lot of it comes down to how do the 2 game styles match up when they face each other. There's a reason why head-to-heads are different amongst different players, and I think with Djokovic, he executed a very specific game plan against Sinner. He served really big. He clearly took a lot of risk. He went line very, very quickly in the rallies on the forehand, specifically as well against Sinner, and it worked. And he hugged the baseline. He tried not to give up much room on the baseline as well. Tried to set the ball early, and he ended up making sure that Sinner wasn't really able to break the sidelines. And Sinner doesn't play with, as you said, as much shape as Alcaraz as well. So he wasn't really able to break that hold that Djokovic had for periods of the match. Whereas with Alcaraz, as you mentioned, the variety really came into play, and the different trajectories, the ability to drag Djokovic with angles, and it's just a lot more natural for Carlos. And I think if you take the forehand cross court, for example, with Carlos and Sinner, there is a distinct difference. Carlos is able to hit that forehand cross in many different ways, and it gives you different looks. I think Sinner, in less ways, I think is the best way to put it. And it's not to say that he doesn't have a very good forehand cross court, but what is interesting is that after speaking to a few tennis analysts, they've actually said that if you were someone who wanted to take advantage of Jannik Sinner's weaknesses, the way to do that is to go hard into his forehand in the cross-court exchanges. And that's because I think, and it happened against Novak, he tried at times to go for too much cross court to find that angle, but it's not as natural for him to find those angles as it is for Carlos. And that was quite interesting to see the difference in the semi final versus the final, where Carlos was more comfortable. In the first set, he tried to almost play like Yannick, as you mentioned, and tried to go toe to toe with Novak. And in the second set, he realized, and that's what makes, I think, is you use the word mature. I think Carlos is, at his age, a very mature player. He's able to adapt his game and his tactical game plan during a match. And Novak alluded to that in the post match press conference. He said that Carlos is able to adapt, and that's what makes him so great. And Carlos did that. He adapted, he made it more physical against Novak, and Novak had to then think, okay, well, how do I combat this? And the problem that Novak has is, because of his age, there is a limit to what he can do against these guys. And so he has to play a few different ways, and that's kind of where it stops. Whereas Carlos at his age is different. And I feel like he's also got a multitude of ways to play, but he's not maybe handicapped by the age factor. And Novak is not 25, 26 anymore. So, I think that was really interesting to see. And as you mentioned, I think the styles match up really, really well. And those cat and mouse points they play are just incredible to watch. And even at his age, Novak was still able to almost keep up with Carlos in those rallies. So I think it was a really intriguing watch. And I think what was really impressive to me from Carlos was the fact that this was his first Australian Open final, and he was playing against someone who had never lost one. And Novak in that fourth set, obviously, as you mentioned, was really trying to get the crowd up. Carlos was under pressure, but he managed to, like Novak did against Sinner when he had match points, even, and he ended up losing those points. He was able to keep his cool, stay very calm and collected, and managed to get it done. And I think that might be one area that both players have similarities, and that is in the mental aspect of their games. They both are very cool when it comes to big moments. There's probably a reason why Carlos has only lost the one Grand Slam final out of the 8 now that he's played. Which is an incredible stat for someone of 22 years of age.
Yeah. Well, look, it's a lot. You done that very nice, thorough analysis there. Just a couple of comments on that. Carlos, until they're now even in the rivalry. So Novak has had his days against Carlos. So despite all that variety, so I think he would argue, I know that Carlos will adjust. I know how he can improvise. I know just how great he is. But I also, as you were saying in the press conference, I know what I have to do to combat it. What was frustrating him on this occasion is he couldn't do it in those second and third sets, especially, and that was very frustrating. And that's no knock on Carlos. It's different demands as far as so I think, and then as far as your point about the Australian final, it's true, but Carlos is so experienced now. As you mentioned, it's a 7-1 record in the Grand Slam finals. He's beaten Novak in 2 center court finals. This is his 3rd win in a final over Novak at a Grand Slam event. Novak's beaten him in a French semi when Carlos cramped, and then that fascinating quarterfinal last year in Melbourne. So I don't think it was. So I think that part I don't think was very daunting to him. I think he wanted to get the Australian title in his treasure chest. He wanted to have it, and that was the big thing. The pressure was more about that than facing Novak on a court where he'd never lost a final, right? So that's, I think, how he looked at it. I look at it more like you do, but I don't think that's how Carlos thinks, and so I think I don't think he was at all, I don't think he found that whole situation intimidating. And now as far as this notion about the cross-court forehand, it's true. I see what these analysts are getting at. I just think when Yannick is at his very best, though, and with all that power that he's got, it's not as he'll never match Carlos's varieties, and it's never going to be as crowd pleasing. But when he's really on, when he's at the very top of his game, I don't think there are many holes. I just think he just bludgeons you right off the court. And I think Djokovic did a great job of not allowing him to do that on that particular occasion. Because as you already pointed out, he was hugging the baseline. He was so aggressive. He was so assertive in the points. He was so willing to take his forehand down the line whenever possible, particularly the forehand. What amazed me was in this tournament, we always have talked about the backhand down the line for Djokovic. He's talked about it. Well, in this tournament, in both those matches, in the first set against Carlos and all the way through against Sinner, his forehand down the line was really more his trademark shot. So that's all I'd add. But I thought your analysis was really quite good.
Yeah, I mean, incredible two matches. And the one thing I want to just wrap up on for Carlos specifically is he's the youngest player in the Open era on the men's side to win the career Grand Slam. Where does he rank for you, Steve, in terms of, I guess Nadal is the person that he's overtaken. He's still very young in his career, so it's difficult to compare. But where are you picturing him ending up potentially? Because it's a difficult one, I think, so early in his career, but he's breaking a lot of records. He doesn't, Novak's now 38. How many years does he have left? I don't know. It seems like he's only really got maybe one other clear rival in all the slams, which is Yannick. So what are you thinking in terms of, like, where do you think he will eventually end up? I mean, he's already putting forward, like, I guess, the argument to be a great because he's won 7 Grand Slams, but where do you think he'll end up eventually?
I remember some people thought I was a bit crazy when I did it, but this was right around the time. I can't remember whether I said this before that U.S. Open or after, but it was back in 22. And I think it was around the time, I think it might have been after he won that Open. But my prediction at that time was he ends up with 15 to 17 majors. I mean, to ask him to go into the 20s like the iconic trio of this era is asking a lot, and he may yet be up to it, but it requires an awful lot of enduring excellence. It requires being injury free for large portions of your career. I'm not sure Carlos is going to be that fortunate. He's had his share of injuries already. They've dealt with it well. Fortunately, it hasn't kept him out of hasn't been that costly yet. We don't. Then the other thing we don't know is who's going to emerge 2-3 years from now. Where's Fonseca going to be? There's all these variables that could change things where suddenly there's guys out there that make them uncomfortable that are not on the scene right now. So I'm allowing for all that, but I still say that it's hard for me to see how he doesn't end up in that 15 to 17 range and possibly a little higher. But I think to go higher, he's even said himself, Faizan, that he doesn't think he can have a Djokovic career in the sense of playing, and I think he meant Roger and Rafa too. Going deep into his 30s was not something he envisions for himself. He's determined to get a lot accomplished before and then leave the game. That's how he's talking now. He could change his mind, who knows? But it's such a punishing sport, and I know that these three guys, I mean, that Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer had that streak of from 03 into 20 through 23. They had a period there from the time Federer won Wimbledon where they won 66 of the 81 majors. Just those three guys. I mean, I don't think we're going to see that again, even from Carlos and Yannick, that far, that many years. So that I think inevitably there are going to be some guys coming out there. There are going to be some new Wawrinkas, some new Murrays, but guys that can seriously challenge Carlos for different reasons. Some of them built more like Sinner, some of them built more like Carlos himself. Different styles of play, different temperaments. Who will by 2028, I would say. I don't know about this year and next, but by 28, I think we're going to be seeing some of these guys come along who are threats that we don't know as much about now, and we can't tell exactly where Fonseca is headed. So that's how I look at it. There's a certain inevitability that he goes well into those double digits because he's just so gifted and so driven. But and for a while, I think we're going to still see a lot more finals between him and the Alcaraz Sinner final. They're bound to play in a couple more this year. Novak, I think Djokovic has got a serious shot at Wimbledon. But those two guys are probably going to end up playing, most likely Sinner Alcaraz is the final in Roland Garros and the Open. And so one of the keys short term is going to be, does Sinner and Alcaraz go back and forth? I mean, we sort of saw that last year, where the miraculous win for Jannik at Roland Garros from triple match point down to win a fifth set tiebreak, and then to Sinner to answer it impressively at Wimbledon in 4 sets, but Carlos to come right back and get Jannik in the U.S. Open final. But even then, year-end championships, Sinner wins over a somewhat hobbled but still impressive Alcaraz. So we saw a lot of fluctuation. We saw Sinner, it's particularly impressive from him, given that he had lost 5 in a row to Alcaraz through that Roland Garros match, and then it became 7 out of 8 after he lost Cincinnati in the Open. So those were a lot of tough setbacks, but he keeps bouncing back, and that's gonna have a lot to do with it too. How many does Sinner? He's at 4 right now. The question's going to be, can he keep winning his share and therefore keep Carlos's totals down and start and share and have a big slice of the pie himself? So that's basically how I look at it. And there's going to be some great players ahead of us that we don't know as much about. So looking too far into it's just that over the next couple of years, I think Carlos could pick up. I don't see how he doesn't win, at least one more this year, maybe 2. I don't think the Grand Slam, although anything is possible. And then I think it's inevitably he'd win 2 next year, and 2 to 3 now. But then the question, so then he starts getting himself. By then, okay, maybe he's already in double digits. But from there, we don't know. We just don't know. Who's going to be around and how healthy he's going to be. And even looking at the rest of the year, this year and next year, what if he had an untimely injury that took him out of Wimbledon and then led him into the Open, but not at full physical force? Those are the things we can't know. And Sinner faces the same types of issues. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm just glad. I want that rivalry. I've talked with you about this in the past, though. I want to see it fluctuate. I was glad that Sinner came back into it a couple of times last year, and the danger is that Carlos could take off. But I think Sinner is he's so disciplined and so professional, and he knows himself well, and he's got great coaching, and he convinced Cahill to stay in the fold, which was important. And Carlos, look, he's gone through his transition without Juan Carlos, and he did a great job in Australia without him, and he'll figure out what he wants to do in terms of going forward with his coaching. But I think he's so self-sufficient that I never worry about him. I didn't worry about him on the Juan Carlos front either, because I thought people are putting too much into that. There's no question how much Juan Carlos did to help him, but I felt like people shouldn't assume that Carlos is going to be wandering around Melbourne in a state of befuddlement, not knowing how to proceed on the court, confused about how to play certain guys. There's no confusion. And
Yeah.
he showed that in Melbourne. And so I'm fascinated to see. I mean, there's a potential, obviously, to pick up quite a few. I mean, the where we stand, I'll be very surprised, actually. I will say this. If he isn't in double digits by the end of 27, I'll be shocked. He's
Yeah.
got the 7 already. He'll be in double digits already. The question is how many can he keep picking up in those years ahead? So I would say, based on that, more likely that he ends up on the high end of my original projection, which was would be 17, than the 15.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's my long-winded response, but you forced me to do some on-the-spot thinking.
So on the spot maths. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, perfect. Amazing. Okay. Should we talk about the women's?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Why
So
not?
we can start off with the final, which I think was a pretty entertaining final. Some short points, but very entertaining points between two very big hitters. You have a very good rivalry as well. What were your thoughts on the final, Steve, in terms of the quality of it?
I thought the quality was terrific. It kind of resembled, it was better quality than the previous Australian final they played, which was also 3 sets. No, I thought it was really quite good. I like it. To me, it's very refreshing to see a women's match like that comes down to basically the first 2 sets, it came down to one crucial break in each set. Sabalenka losing a tough opening game on her serve to start the match. and that not being able to get it back. Rybakina is to me is clearly the best server in women's tennis, and so it wasn't a shock that she couldn't get it back. And then Rybakina stays with her all the way to 4-all in the second, and then Sabalenka got that break at the end and ended up winning 5 games in a row to get to 3-11 in the third. That was an impressive phase for her, but I think the trouble is that you go to the changeover 3-love and you're feeling like you're in a commanding position, but you aren't necessarily there because it's one break and it just looks larger than it is. And I think that's what happened on that to some degree. But also, obviously, we had Rybakina's coach yelling out to her more energy, and that definitely was timely and very good advice. And she buckled right down and hit a couple of great serves, and then it was kind of, she got blitzed for a while. It was like, I mean, she had one more chance at Sabalenka to get the break for 4-2 and missed a back in return narrowly cross court. That was well hit. That was bad luck. They had a close up of her and she kind of rolled her eyes because I think she knew she'd hit it about as well as she could. And it was a bit unlucky that it went wide. I mean, she had to go near that sideline and it just missed. So 6 out of 7 games for Rybakina to finish it off. I frankly believe, I'm curious to get your view, that she won it more than Sabalenka lost it. It's easy to look at the scoreline and say, wow, Sabalenka, she let another one get away. Did she choke another one away? I don't think she choked it away. I think she was outplayed. She was beaten by a great player who we've seen all these signs. I mean, Rybakina, we knew from the time she won her first major at Wimbledon. So we've known for 4 years how good she is. And then she ended last year. That was a big step to win the WTA finals, beat the players she did, survive a tough 3-set skirmish with Pegula in the semis, to win that final over Sabalenka there, which after the year that Sabalenka had to beat her in the final of that event was impressive. And so we've sort of seen it coming. And the time in between her winning Wimbledon and those next 3 years were tricky for her, and they could have been better. But I think she's now back better, bigger, and better than she's ever been. And there's more serenity out there. She's always calm, but you'd see the nerves in the way she played. I didn't see any. I saw very little nerves. I saw nerves in the semi against Pegula, because she probably should have closed that out with the match points at 5-3 in the second set. She had completely dominated the match. But Pegula is a tough competitor. She makes you beat her. And then Rybakina had to save those set points in the tiebreak. She was a bit fortunate to get out of the tiebreak. But again, I thought it was a display of mental toughness there that enabled her to avoid 3 sets, which would have been very dangerous given the way Pegula was playing in this tournament. And given the fact that Pegula has had not lost a set, and she defeated the defending champion Keys impressively in straight. She beat Aryna Sabalenka in straight. She was on a roll, and as you know, Faizan, it tends to be with Jess that she gets herself involved sometimes unnecessarily in 3-set contests, and she's the first one to acknowledge that point. And I think she was very pleased with herself that she stayed solid in every match and came in confident. So that had she gone to a 3rd set with Rybakina, that would have been very dangerous for Rybakina. And I think Rybakina understood it, and she steadied herself and got through that battle in straight, which I think was important coming into the final. And that was on the heels, by the way, of Rybakina beating Swiatek 5-1. And that was impressive because the first set was kind of up for grabs, early exchange of breaks. She breaks Iga at 5-6 to win the set, and then just destroyed her in the second set. Great serving performance. So those 3 wins at the end, Swiatek, Pegula, Sabalenka. I mean, I hope she'll build on it. I don't know whether she wins another major this year or not, but she'll certainly contend hard for all the remaining 3. I don't quite see her winning the French. I still don't think that's her best surface, even though she played Iga very tough there last year. She can play well on clay. I'd be surprised if she won there. Wouldn't be at all surprised if she won a second Wimbledon or a first US Open. So I like the way she set herself up, Faizan, for the rest of this year.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point about whether Rybakina won it or Sabalenka lost it, I agree. I think Rybakina won it rather than Sabalenka losing it. I think it's
don't you think that Sabalenka agrees with us. I sense by the comments that she
Yeah,
made, yes, it was frustrating to get close again, and it's tough when you lost such a tight three-setter to Keys here last year, and Coco. That match was hanging in the balance at the end in Roland Garros. Another tight three-setter. Then she comes back, and then he loses a tough semi at Wimbledon to Anisimova, and comes back and wins the Open. Now to lose a third final, going back to the start of last year.
yeah.
But I think she took it in the right light. I think she understood that she had played well, given herself a chance to win, and had not tossed it away.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like actually when it comes to Rybakina, so they from what I know, they actually do practice a fair amount together. And the head-to-head is 8-7 now, I think, to Sabalenka. Sabalenka in the past has talked about the fact that she doesn't really enjoy playing Rybakina. And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think obviously we know that she's the best server on the WTA tour, and that is probably a bit frustrating for Sabalenka, who loves to be ultra aggressive on return, especially off the second serve return. But I think also off the ground, Rybakina is one of the only players who's able to match or even overpower Sabalenka from the
And she
baseline.
does,
That frustrates her.
and it's easy power. That's what
Exactly.
impresses
Yeah.
me against Rebecca.
Yeah.
It's easy power, and she's so natural. And I always watching her, I always wonder: is she quick enough? Is she fast enough? There's players out there that their footwork isn't necessarily better, but their movement is better. Their mobility
Yeah.
is better. And I never thought that ended up costing her in this tournament at all. And when she's striking the ball, when her ball striking is this good, you're not going to get that chance. And Sabalenka had very few opportunities to exploit that. So
Yeah.
yeah, she's realistic about what she's up against, and I think Sabalenka realizes, you know what, Rybakina is. If she's playing like this, she should be right in there with all of us. So I have nothing to be ashamed of.
Exactly. Yeah. I think she knows the level that Rybakina can play at, and I think she probably realized that during the match, and that's why, after in the press conference, she essentially just alluded to the fact that yes, she played well and she lost today, but next time hopefully she'll win. And I think it was. I imagine it would have been frustrating because she came up against someone last year who also is Madison Keys, who can also go toe to toe when she's playing her best tennis. But she is, as we know, is a bit more inconsistent than say Rybakina. But I think those two players, and maybe there's a handful of players, barely anyone really on tour that can match her when they're playing their best tennis, and those two can when it comes to the power department. And I think what's also interesting on the movement front is that Rybakina, as you said, she's maybe not the most mobile, and she's definitely not going to be an elite mover like a Swiatek or a Goff when it comes to court coverage. But her specific movement when it comes to positioning, especially preparing early for her ground strokes, is actually. I was watching quite closely this tournament, and I think people don't realize how sharp she is to get to prepare early. And what's also quite interesting about her is she has quite compact forehand and backhand swings, and that just means that, as you said, it's easy power because she's just got incredible timing,
Yeah, she
and that
does.
does help as well. That she doesn't have to wind up because if she had, for example, expansive forehand like a Goff, she would probably really struggle because she doesn't have a type of movement to go
No,
hand
it's
in hand
true.
with that.
But I think she's also done a lot of work on her forehand. The forehand looked to me to be a good deal more solid and more reliable. She could count on it more than ever before. And that was the shot in the past that tended to go on her. Yeah, it was very impressive. To me, it's the best tennis I've ever seen her play on a sustained basis from the quarters through the finals, and it gives me a lot of encouragement. And then look to Sabalenka, it's somebody that's won the last two U.S. Opens. She had her two Australians. She's gonna inevitably, to me, win Wimbledon. It's not inevitable that she wins Roland Garros, but I think she's got a pretty good shot because I think she's underrated on clay. So, and
I
I
agree.
I, I hope that she reminds herself of that, and that her team reminds her of it, and she just sticks to it. I think she's more mature about it. I don't think she was all frenzied or crazed over this one. I didn't see any annex during the match that were of concern to me. I thought she handled it as well as she could, and she was a bit surprised by the stunning comeback of Rybakina and doing her best to thwart it, but we didn't see the kind of behavior we were seeing from her in Roland Garros, for instance. She was at times sort of coming apart at the seams emotionally, and I didn't see that this time. And I liked what I saw. I liked what I saw. She got a bit uptight in the Aryna Sabalenka match at Wimbledon too, and had some words there with her near the end. And I didn't like that either, but I liked what I saw all the way through the Open, and I still think it was a great Australian for her, despite this defeat.
Yeah, I mean, and what incredible last year or so, right, she's had as well. So I think she can probably think, well, okay, out of the last 5 slams, I've at least, take Wimbledon out of it, semi-finals, but
Right,
in
right,
all the other 4, she's made at least a final and she won the
right.
US Open. So she's probably thinking in her head, it's just a matter of time. I keep on making finals. There's no way I'm going to continue to just, lose them at this rate. And she's probably right. If that
And listen,
happens.
don't you think, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but that had she been able to squeeze out that tight match with Aryna Sabalenka at Wimbledon, I would have liked her chances against Iga
I agree.
on grass. And
Yeah,
even though
well,
Iga obviously had adapted very well to the grass, I would have given her a pretty good chance to win that match too. And I think that's in the back of her mind. So that's another one tournament that could have. I mean, if you think of how close she was in the semis,
yeah,
and she puts herself into the final, she's got a pretty good chance to win.
I agree. Yeah. And we're still awaiting a Sabalenka Swiatek final on a
Oh,
Grand Slam.
please.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
we need it. We need it. It would be great.
yeah.
It'd be great because they bring the best out of each other.
I agree. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually crazy to think that so Sabalenka and Rybakina have played 2 Grand Slam finals now, but Rybakina and Swiatek haven't, and obviously
Yeah.
Sabalenka and Swiatek haven't either. So you'd expect them to, but Goff has been, she's been battling against Sabalenka and Swiatek, and I think surely, given how stable the top 5, 6 in women's tennis have been now for the last year and a half, 2 years, you'd expect that to now those final matchups to come to fruition. So hopefully that's the case because they will
And
be
you're
really
touching,
exciting.
and I'm sorry again, I just don't want to forget the thought because you're triggering thoughts. I apologize, but you know what? You're talking about something that I think is so important. Is to me one of the things I kept carping about on and harping on in years past was I didn't like the musical chairs. I didn't like seeing women jump in and out of Grand Slam finals, win them, disappear. There's a very stable group at the top right now, and Sabalenka is leading that group, obviously. But I think it's a good thing for women's tennis that these familiar faces keep coming up against each other. They have this strong a top 6 or 7, and it will serve the sport well, and the public will have their favorites. And I'm really looking forward to watching it all unfold. Now, one additional comment about Sabalenka, it's interesting too, is that the 2 golf finals that she lost, she could have won either one of those too. I mean, it's so I know she can't keep replaying those in her mind. She just has to keep, you know, stay determined, stay focused, and be purposeful about all of it, and work hard because the players that are beating her, these are matches that are winnable for her. You know, some of them can start going her way. The Keys match could easily have gone her way. It was a golden moment for Madison, but that's a match again that Sabalenka could have prevailed.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, she hasn't lost a Grand Slam final in straight sets. And as
Right,
you said, that
right.
goes to your point around her having her chances. They've all been close 3-set losses that she's had when she's lost.
Right.
So that's something that, as you say, is a tweak here or there. And like we were talking about earlier on the men's, Novak playing those pressure points so well, something that she's very good friends with Novak and they speak a lot. So that's something that she needs to try and get him to rub off on her in terms of the mentality in those pressure points because
Yeah, I
he
think
is the master right on that.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure he's offered some good advice already. So I feel like she's fine. She's coming out of this one. It's nothing to worry about. You know, she had her bad reaction at Roland Garros last year and then apologized later. And then she got on with things from that for the rest of the year and reaffirmed that she was the best woman player in the world. She'll try to do the same thing now this year. So I kind of hope for her sake, though, that she doesn't have to come to the U.S. Open looking for her first slam title of the year again. You know, that she can somehow get it done at Roland Garros or Wimbledon, more likely Wimbledon. But in turn, I think that if she were to play Rybakina again at Wimbledon, it will be tough once more because the grass is only going to help Rybakina serve that much more. That first serve especially will be harder to cope with. So
Yeah,
I'd
agreed.
like to see them meet, but I see another coin flip in that match.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had picked Rebecca to win the Australian Open before the tournament and also before the year started, so I can, for once, I can give myself a pat on the back. But
Well, you should. You should. Absolutely.
but I picked. I actually so I'd picked Sabalenka to take Roland Garros, and I have to wait until the draw comes out to confirm that. But
You
I think
picked.
she's also Sabalenka to win Roland
Yeah,
Garros.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I can
I
see
think
why
she's
because
underrated, like you say.
yeah, and I think she's fully capable of doing it there. And she played that really good semi against Iga, and the 6-love in the third was a very impressive response, having split those sets. And frankly, if it had not been, I didn't like her using it as an alibi, the conditions. But frankly, had it been calmer, obviously her chances would have increased that much more. And you just never know what the weather's going to be like at Roland Garros, so you can't count on anything in that regard. But I can see your call there. Look, I mean, she's knocking on the door at every major. Four three-set final round losses at majors, four titles, constantly in the thick of things, and Roland Garros is something she can conquer. She can definitely conquer it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking it's just a matter of time. I'm not sure how many she would win, but as you said, it's probably not her most natural surface, but she's definitely underrated on that one. And it was great to see Rebecca back up the 2022 Wimbledon win because
Yeah,
there's quite a number of players on the WTA tour who are part of the one Grand Slam club, of course. And we want to see players back up those runs. And I think Rebecca
oh
is too good a player not to be winning more than one and probably two slams as well. She should be winning, I think, multiple of them. So interesting to see how she gets on for the
yeah.
rest
I
of
would
the
I
year.
would say I'm sorry. I would say, just to back up your point, I'd be surprised if she ended her career with less than 5 or 6, somewhere in that range. I would expect her to win 3 to 4 more before she's done. Maybe three is the more likely, but anything less than that, I'd be surprised. Because I think she's got a window here, couple of years now, the next couple of years, where she's got there's some great things ahead for her in that span, no doubt about it.
Yeah, agreed. What's your read on Iga Swiatek, Steve? Because she obviously won Wimbledon last year, and that was an incredible tournament. But if we take that, put that to one side in isolation, the other Grand Slams, the results haven't quite been. I mean, she hasn't won a Grand Slam, right? Apart from that Wimbledon win, she's made semi-finals, and there have been some consistent results, but she hasn't been dominating. Obviously, the women's game like she was a couple of years back. She's still a prominent figure. What do you think of her level and I guess her standing in the women's game right now, moving forward?
Yeah, she's a very hard one to assess. I mean, because she went into that tailspin on the last year and had a bad clay court circuit, and then managed to sort of do just enough to restore her pride and her confidence by getting to that semi and losing in three to Sabalenka. And I think that was a step back toward a step toward winning Wimbledon. If she'd had a bad Roland Garros, I think she came away from that feeling a little better about herself. I thought the way that she played at Wimbledon, Towson, Benchik, Anisimova. Okay, granted, Anisimova was overwhelmed by the occasion, and so it was a love and love final. But still, Iga had to. That was partly Iga putting the clamps down and doing what she needed to do to make sure the match never became a match. I thought it would lead to more, and it didn't. I thought she'd have a better second half, and I thought she might well win the U.S. Open. And Anisimova avenged it. Anisimova beat her again in the year-end championships. Now she comes over. Now this was another match you were curious about coming in. It seemed like both players fully capable of winning that match. Coming in against Rybakina, and I thought it could go either way. I knew she'd have to struggle, but I thought she was capable of winning it, and I thought it would be closer than 5-1. So I don't know. I'm careful to be too critical because just there are times here where you think she's in more trouble than maybe she is. And I think she's capable of reinventing herself again, or reestablishing is a better word, reestablishing herself. But she definitely, one of the keys is definitely, I think it's going to be very important for her to play consistently well, win some titles prior to Roland Garros. And I think winning Roland Garros would do her a world of good, and would help her to relax a bit more. And then she wouldn't have to have to be quite so consumed with defending Wimbledon. Just try to do the best she can, and then get back on the hard courts and see if it's possible to win a second U.S. Open. So I don't know. I'm fascinated to see how she will perform. I was very optimistic after Wimbledon that she was going to keep it going, keep that standard up. Right now, I don't know what to expect, but she's such a great player. I don't want to be too negative, because I think she's constantly working, tinkering. I'd like to see her a little more relaxed, Faizan. She worries, and she sometimes seems so tight when you watch her set up to serve, or it looks like, I mean, that you can, the tension, you can almost touch it, you feel it. And I wish she could just lose a layer of that and learn to be a little bit more, just to enjoy it a bit more, to go out and enjoy her tennis more, because there are times when it doesn't look like she's getting a heck of a lot of pleasure out of it. So right now, I'm on the fence. By no means do I think she's won her last major, but I don't know what to expect in the next 12 months.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and a developing situation, that's for sure. Yeah, on the enjoyment front, I think she's trying to, I think, enjoy things more. I've noticed that she's been doing more work off court, in terms of brand deals and adverts and things like that. And in the past, she wasn't. I don't know whether she wasn't approached. I would assume it's that she wasn't as open to doing them, because I imagine she would have been approached, because she's been a big star on tour for a while, and of course she's won multiple slams. So that's been quite interesting. She's been more open to giving a lot more of her personality and maybe her time, and that's been quite interesting. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for her to, as you said, maybe be a bit more relaxed and not feel like, she has to constantly keep everything in, and that's when it can boil over. So hopefully that starts translating onto court as well, and she seems a little bit more relaxed on court. But it's an interesting one, because she's definitely got a lot of attributes to succeed on any surface, but you can also see why a Sabalenka or a Rybakina will really trouble her at slams as well, and they have
I
done.
mean, that's the thing. And then you look at, say, going back to Wimbledon, the French is a different story, because if she can sort of get back in the flow again on the clay the way we saw in other years, and I don't expect her to play like she did last year. She'd hit kind of an emotional crossroads, and things were not right on the way to Roland Garros, and she started to improve there. But I don't think we'll see a clay court circuit like that. But Wimbledon, let's just look at Wimbledon trying to defend. I mean, if she played Rybakina there on that court, I'm making Rybakina a pretty clear favorite in my mind right now. And if she played Sabalenka, I'm making her a favorite, not necessarily as clear a favorite. There's a lot of players, and the problem is those problems carry over on the hard courts. There are players that can hold their own or beat her, and obviously Aryna Sabalenka is one of them. And I'm not so sure she's always going to have her way with Pegula either, who beat her on the grass right before Wimbledon last year to win that title. And so I don't know. There's players she can, on any given day, she can win or they can win. It's not clear to me how this is going to play out. I mean, there'll be no more. I don't think we're going to ever see a dominant number one Iga again. But the important thing is that she wins her share of big matches against fellow top 10 players who go out there now believing they have a pretty good chance.
I agree. And I think Rebecca now has this crazy where she's won the last, I want to say, 10 matches against top 10
I think
players,
that's right. Yeah.
which is absolutely incredible. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it just shows that the level that she can possess is incredible. And if she can keep that consistency, I think, throughout the majority of this year, then she puts herself in a really good spot, I think, and in all the big tournaments.
And she shouldn't put a lot of pressure on herself. I hope that her coach will remind her, and she will also reflect on and realize is okay, she's got one already this year. Try to build on it. Try to see if you can win another this year, but just play as well as you can the rest of the year, and don't make it an imperative that if you don't win another major in 2026, you're a failure. You can't get into that kind of a mindset. You've gotten your second major. You're no longer in that one slam wonder club. You alluded to that earlier. Those days are done, and now you're trying to build on it. And you definitely strive to win some more of the premier prizes, but don't get so obsessed that it makes you uptight when you go to those events. She was not, for the most part, she was not uptight in Melbourne. She was calm and she was composed and she was driven to win, but she had her nerves under control.
Yeah, for sure. To round off the women's, then I want to get your thoughts on Coco, because she won Roland Garros last year, and then she obviously had the serve issues, and she had the biomechanist come in and try and sort that out, and then he didn't travel with her in the Asia swing. Then they had the WTA finals, and obviously didn't quite go the way she would have liked. And now the Australian Open again, maybe I don't know if it's a shocking loss, but it was a very convincing loss to Svitolina 6-1, 6-2, and probably didn't see that coming given the head-to-head, etc. And she not looked terrible in this tournament, but probably not her best level again. What are your thoughts on how she's been looking in the last few months, and I guess moving forward as well?
I'm going to sound a little less kind than you in the sense of it just when it comes to the Svitolina match, not anything else. Everything else I agree with, but I thought that was a bad performance. It reminiscent in some ways of how out of sorts and helpless she looked against Naomi at the U.S. Open. These are not embarrassing losses, but you to lose that decisively and to just be making so many fundamental mistakes. I didn't like the way she played that match, and I thought she lost faith in her serve, and the forehand she had no reliability off the forehand. Obviously, the same areas we've always talked about, but and she'd had a couple of three setters leading up to that were not bad, but that's living dangerously again to keep getting in these three setters. I didn't like the way she played that match against Svitolina, and I don't know. I worry about her. I mean, again, sometimes when you least expect it from her, she comes out of it and suddenly reemerges, and it's the old buoyant, confident, commanding Coco who can play great tennis and is enjoying life and not letting any kind of negative thoughts get into her mind. And but right now, I don't know. The Open, we knew she'd gotten all that technical advice. McMillan had all that work on her serve and her forehand. A lot of technical work being done leading into the Open, so you could understand why there'd be some confusion in her mind that could have led to the one-sided loss to Naomi. But I would have thought after the fall and the off season that we would have seen better from her in Australia. And I want to see how she looks in her next few tournaments. Then she has what could be a burden of trying to go back to defend at Roland Garros. I mean, obviously she's happy that she has that title in her collection now, but is she a good bet? She'll be a strong contender for sure, but I could see her getting upset there somewhere along the line. And then the question becomes, can she finally have a good Wimbledon? She hasn't yet found that formula on the grass. And then coming back to the Open where we know she's won, and that helps. But I don't know. There's just this quality in her right now, this unpredictability. You don't know which Coco is going to show up, and I think it's troublesome to her. You sense the frustration in her sometimes when she's having days and nights like that, and what's happening and why is it happening and what in the world is going on here. And I think that's really what she was thinking against Svitolina, who just did a great job of exploiting it to the hill and kept a lot of balls in play and peppered away at Coco's forehand and played a smart match and served well herself. But I think she knew that it didn't take an extraordinary performance that night. It took a disciplined, solid performance, and that was good enough to win 1 and 2, which was, to me, was kind of sad.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just been a strange last few months. I would say personally for her, because it was such a valiant performance of Roland Garros, and it came, I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but it maybe wasn't expected by a lot of people. And she backed up the US Open win with the Roland Garros one now here. And you just thought, okay, now is the time for her to start capitalizing on it and pushing on. And it's gone the opposite way or direction. And that's been a bit strange to witness. But yeah, I'm quite intrigued now to see how she fares for the rest of the season. Of course, you're going into Roland Garros as the defending champion as well, and it just seems like the serve and the forehand, there's just still issues, and it looked like she'd slightly remodeled her forehand before the Australian Open, but then she maybe lost faith in that tinker during this tournament, and I just it looks like she's in almost like a transitional phase, and I'm wondering just how long that's going to last. And she's still
Well,
very young; she's 21, so she's got time on her side. But
yeah.
I do wonder how long it's going to take for her to get things to click again.
Yeah, well, so do her. So do those who care the most about her and are biggest boosters out there. People that really believe in her and want her to believe in herself. And she's quite demanding too. So there's a lot of self demands there. She's asking a lot of herself and puts a certain amount of pressure on herself. But obviously, she wants to respond soon. She doesn't want this to be a kind of a wipeout year where she doesn't fare well at any of the majors, and that she's then trying to, again, in terms of age, there'd be plenty of time to kind of recover her confidence and start winning again. But I think she wants to at least get to the latter stages of two of these remaining three majors this year, and do her best to try to win one of them. Again, I sound a bit like I did with Iga. I don't know. I don't know what to anticipate with Coco right now because of the state of mind and the wild fluctuations in form from set to set, from match to match, from tournament to tournament. She's been hard to figure. Now maybe she had a great clay court season last year, not just Roland Garros. So maybe that will help by the time we get there, even if she doesn't do that well in Indian Wells and Miami. Maybe a kind of a reawakening could happen there uh, for Coco, and have a good clay court campaign and make a bid to defend that French. But obviously, it won't be easy. I'd be really interested to see her playing Iga again, who she's had all this great success against the last four times. Someone who dominated her up until then. See if they met again pre Roland Garros and again at Roland Garros, and that'll tell us a lot about both of them, by the way. Because from Iga's standpoint, that's where she's supposed to demonstrate her superiority. And from Coco's standpoint, she wants to prove that this recent run has been no accident, and that she can beat her on any surface. So that's a match I want to see played out leading up to Paris, but particularly in Paris. I'd love to see them meet there.
Yeah, I agree. I think in Paris would be the ideal. So hopefully we get that one as well. Steve, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to touch on
No, I
before we
think
wrap up?
no, you did a great job. I think we've done a pretty thorough overview of this tournament and talked about what matters. And as you know, it was really the home stretch that made this tournament that made it come alive and made it something that will last long in the hearts and minds of all the tennis fans worldwide who enjoyed it so much. And I think I believe and hope that we touched on every important topic.
Yeah, we definitely touched on a lot. So appreciate your time as always. Guys, if you haven't done so already, please do remember to the like button and subscribe if you're new, and also follow if you are listening on a podcast platform. You can also check out Steve on on X. I know you're on there as well, Steve. But of course, a pleasure as always to have you on, Steve, as well, and look forward to catching up. Hopefully post Roland Garros, and I'm sure we'll hopefully see each other at Wimbledon as well.
I hope so, Faizan. It was fun as always.